I built a new life for us after the fire, from nothing, with my bare hands. She filled it with laughter, with lies, and with my father. But what she was counting were the nights she shared with. We woke to a sound we didn't recognize right away, the crackling of burning wood, the shouts of neighbors outside, the distant, eerie howling of something coming undone. When we stepped into the hallway, half of it was already lost to smoke and the kind of heat that makes you forget where you are. We didn't stop to think. We grabbed the kids, our documents, in 2 bags my wife, Jennifer, pulled from the closet with shaking hands, throwing jackets over pajamas as the boys cried and asked what was happening. The house burned down in 40 minutes. We were lucky. That's what people said later. We didn't lose each other. And yet, as I stood barefoot on the wet asphalt watching everything we owned collapse inward in a shower of sparks and sirens, I felt exposed, like the fire had stripped me of something deeper than walls and possessions. More stock, more hours, more customers asking for help in 3 directions at once. Jennifer was helping as much as she could, but between managing the register, keeping an eye on the boys, and trying to keep our little apartment livable, I could see the strain on her shoulders too. So I started thinking about my father. He'd retired a few years back, early, not because he wanted to, but because the plant he worked at for most of his life shut down without warning. For a while, he tried to stay busy, fixing old radios, volunteering once in a while, taking long walks around the same block in the same town he never left. But every time I called, there was something hollow in his voice, like the man who used to carry steel beams on his back had been slowly worn down by silence. When I mentioned the idea to Jennifer, she hesitated. Just for a second. A barely visible shift in her expression. "You think he'd want to come here?" she asked, stirring the soup that had started to boil over on the stove. "I think he needs something to do," I said. "And I could use the help." "You could too." She nodded, a little slower than usual. "It's your call." That night, I made the call. My father didn't sound surprised. In fact, he said yes before I could even finish the sentence. "I'll be there by the weekend," he said, like we were still talking about moving furniture, not lives. When he arrived, he brought 2 bags, a folded newspaper, and a bottle of that cheap cognac he always claimed helped him sleep better. "I figured I'd start with the shelves," he said, barely setting his bags down before walking into the shop like he already owned the place. Jennifer greeted him with a polite hug. She smiled, told him it was good to see him, and asked how the trip was. He smiled back, called her princess, and joked that I must be treating her well because she still had that glow. At the time, I thought nothing of it. We got to work. In the beginning, it really was helpful. He was strong, reliable, and surprisingly good with people, especially the older customers who appreciated someone who could tell a joke and bag their groceries without crushing the bread. He brought a different energy into the store. Jennifer laughed more with him around. The boys liked having their grandfather closer. For a little while, it felt like we had added a new pillar to the structure we were building. But slowly, things began to shift. I noticed it first in the way he spoke to Jennifer. He'd call her my lady instead of her name. Always with a smile, always like a joke, but something about it sat wrong in my stomach. She'd laugh it off, wave a hand, roll her eyes, but never told him to stop. He touched her shoulder when passing behind her at the counter, brushed imaginary lint from her sleeve, told customers stories that involved her. Once, he brought her coffee with a small flower he picked from the sidewalk. Said it was for the real boss of the store. I asked her about it one evening while we were closing. "Is he making you uncomfortable?" She looked surprised. Maybe too surprised. "No," she said, almost too quickly. "He's just being friendly. You know how he is." And she was right. I didn't know how he was. My father had always been like that, the charming kind, the kind who flirted without crossing lines, who always got a second drink on the house, who smiled at waitresses just long enough for it to feel complimentary and not creepy. My mother used to hate it. She never said it out loud, but I saw the tension in her shoulders every time he joked with other women at parties. I used to chalk it up to personality. Now, I wasn't so sure, but I didn't press Jennifer. Because everything on the surface still looked fine. Sales were up, customers were happy, the boys were doing well in school, and Jennifer kissed me goodnight every evening like nothing had changed. I walked into the back room once to find them laughing, her hand on his arm, his face just a little too close to hers. They stepped apart quickly, told me they were just sorting inventory. I nodded, smiled, told them I'd take over from here. Another time, I caught him staring at her from across the room. Not in a father-in-law kind of way. Like a man watching a woman he wanted. And the worst part was, she didn't even seem to notice. Or maybe she did. I started staying later at the shop. I told myself it was to help. But deep down, I was searching for something I didn't want to find. The shop was doing well. On paper, everything looked like progress. We'd added more stock. We finally had regular customers who greeted us by name, who stopped in just to chat or ask when new shipments were arriving. Jennifer had even designed little labels for some of the products, hand-drawn, neat, with tiny flowers in the corners, and people loved them. My father started calling her our marketing department, and she laughed like he'd just crowned her queen. But the way he said it, and the way she laughed, stayed with me long after the shop closed for the night. I started noticing how often they stood close, not even close like family. Close like people who had forgotten there was anyone else in the room. They'd whisper sometimes, even when there was no need. They'd pass each other items with a softness that felt rehearsed. I tried to explain it away. Tried to tell myself I was overthinking. I believed this was just what familiarity looked like between two people spending long hours in the same space. But then came the touch, enough times that it stopped looking accidental. A hand on her lower back when she bent down to grab something. A playful tug on her apron when she turned away. A brush of fingers when they passed behind the counter. None of it the kind of thing you could point to and say, "There, that's proof." But it built and it lingered. One afternoon, I caught him watching her again. He was watching her body move, with the kind of stillness and narrowed focus that turns curiosity into hunger. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe I had just caught something innocent at the wrong moment. But the wrong moment kept happening. There was a day when she came to the shop wearing a new blouse. Nothing extravagant, just something different, more fitted. She never made a point of how she looked, especially on work days. But that morning she checked the mirror twice and asked if it was too much, with a smile that didn't feel like it was meant for me. My father whistled when she stepped out of the back room and said something like, "You're gonna steal our customers' attention dressed like that." She laughed. I said nothing. I began coming to the shop early, staying later, taking fewer breaks. But then came the moment I stopped pretending. It was late. We'd stayed to reorganize the storage room after hours. Jennifer was tired, said she'd finished some inventory lists in the front while I swept up in the back. I heard them talking, her and my father, voices low, too low. I stepped closer without meaning to, holding the broom still, just listening. He asked if she wanted to get a drink sometime. Just the two of us, nothing serious. She laughed and said, "You're dangerous, you know that?" And he replied, "Only when someone lets me be." I didn't confront them, not that night that I started sleeping less, eating less, and Jennifer noticed. She asked if everything was all right, if something had happened. I told her I was just tired. She touched my hand and said I needed rest. I looked at her and wondered how she could touch me with the same fingers that reached for him behind shelves and closed doors. That weekend, I found myself watching them at breakfast, both sipping coffee, both laughing about something our youngest had said, and I felt like I was watching strangers perform my life in front of me, as if I'd been replaced, slowly, piece by piece, and the version of me that still sat at the table didn't even have a seat anymore. I called my old friend Anton later that day. "You ever set up internal surveillance?" I asked. He paused. "Like cameras?" "Yeah. I will look what I can to do," then I said. "Thanks. I will give you my favorite bottle of whiskey." That evening, we had stayed at the shop longer than usual. Inventory needed reorganizing, and the shelves had to be cleared for a new shipment arriving the next morning. My father offered to lock up, and Jennifer said she'd stay a bit longer to help him, said I looked tired and should go get some rest. She even smiled as she said it, in that gentle way that once felt like care. I nodded, kissed her on the cheek, thanked my father, and left. I walked slowly at first, keys in one hand, phone in the other. I didn't want to go home, not really. I just wanted to breathe in the night air, free from the stale tension that filled the shop like dust that no one wanted to sweep. Halfway down the street, I realized I'd left my phone charger behind. I stopped, looked at the device in my hand, battery blinking red. I had meant to grab the charger from the backroom counter where I'd left it earlier. I almost turned around in silence, but something made me pause. I walked back without hurrying, almost quietly. When I reached the back door of the shop, I didn't knock. I reached for my keys, the ones that gave me access to every lock in the building, and slipped in through the back hallway that led past the inventory shelves and ended just behind the curtain separating the store floor from the storage room. And that's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was laughter. Then something else, a sound I hadn't heard in years. Her voice, breathless, high, cracking in ways it never did when she was tired or angry. Then his voice, deeper, hoarse, almost animalistic. And then another sound entirely, rhythmic. I pressed my hand against the wall, not because I wanted to hear better, but because my legs no longer felt like they belonged to me. The shelves blurred. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick the door in, drag him out by the collar, throw everything we'd built into pieces right there in front of them, and the cameras and the fluorescent lights. But I didn't, because it was realization that what I feared had already happened. But here, in my store, with the woman I loved and the man I came from. And somehow, despite the fury shaking inside me, I stayed quiet and I turned around. Walked out the same way I came in, closed the door without a sound. My phone's battery finally died just as I stepped onto the street. Only one sentence repeating in my head like a whisper I couldn't silence. They did it, and they weren't even careful. That night, I lay in bed beside my sons, watching the ceiling in the dim light from the hallway. In the morning, Jennifer came home early, before I even got out of bed. She kissed my forehead, said they had finished everything, said my father had gone home for the night, said she missed me. The irony of it all was that the day everything truly broke apart began not with a confrontation or a revelation, but with celebration. It was Jennifer's birthday. We decided, or rather, she did, that we should host something modest yet warm, a dinner for close family and a couple of friends. She invited my father, naturally, as though nothing had ever happened between them behind the locked storeroom door, as if I hadn't stood there, listening to the unmistakable sounds that had burned themselves into my mind like the final nail sealing a coffin. I helped clean the apartment, picked up groceries and flowers, even ironed the white tablecloth we hadn't used since moving into the city, the one she once said made things feel more like home. Guests arrived shortly after 7. Friends, cousins, a neighbor or two. My father arrived last, holding a bottle of wine and a bouquet of yellow lilies, Jennifer's favorite. She smiled when she saw them, took the flowers from his hands with a kind of deliberate slowness, and I watched her savor the gesture with a softness that no longer belonged to me. The meal was good. I had made sure of it. There was roasted meat, fresh vegetables, 2 kinds of salad, and no shortage of drinks. Laughter rose easily from the table, glasses clinked, and no one noticed the way their eyes found each other a little too often, or how his hand grazed hers just a moment longer than necessary when she passed him a dish. But I noticed everything. And I kept smiling. As the evening wore on and the plates emptied, the guests began to slip away one by one, leaving behind half-empty bottles and laughter that still echoed faintly through the apartment. Jennifer had a faint flush to her cheeks, the kind that made her look a few years younger, more radiant, more alive. She leaned toward me and whispered that she felt dizzy and needed to lie down for a bit, her fingers brushing mine as she stood. I nodded, kissed the top of her head, and told her to rest. My father watched her leave the room with a gaze that didn't even attempt to hide its hunger, and I wondered, just for a moment, if he truly believed no one else could see what he so obviously revealed. 15 minutes passed. He stood up, yawned, and stretched, making a small show of it, then casually remarked that he should check on her, that she might need water or another blanket. I looked him in the eye, gave the slightest shrug, and said, "Sure, go ahead. Make sure she's all right." He smiled, barely a twitch of the corner of his mouth, and walked away with the gait of a man moving towards something that he already considered his. And I let him. I waited 2 minutes, maybe less, before slipping quietly down the hallway. The door to the bedroom was nearly shut, but not quite, and I stood just close enough to hear everything. Her voice reached me first. "You're nothing like him," she said, her words thick with desire. "He's always tired, always distracted. But you," her voice dropped to a whisper. His laugh followed, a low, pleased sound that crawled under my skin. "He doesn't deserve you. He never did." She giggled and said, "I hate pretending. I wish we didn't have to hide it." There was a pause, followed by the sound of movement, shifting bedsheets, a hand against a wall. "You're perfect," he said through heavy breaths. "My perfect little lady." I stood there, unmoving. This wasn't my family anymore. This wasn't my wife. This wasn't my father. I didn't kick down the door. I turned and walked away. Because I would end this, but not with fists, I would end it with fury. And when I did, there would be nothing left for them to crawl back to. In the days that followed the celebration, everything on the surface remained the same. Jennifer woke early to prepare breakfast and talk to the kids about their day. My father showed up at the shop with his usual energy, cracking jokes and asking about shipments. playing the role of the helpful elder with worn hands and harmless charm. To anyone looking in, we were still a family. But everything had changed. I stopped looking for new evidence. I didn't need it. The truth had already made itself known, and there was nothing more to chase. Now, it was my turn to act. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer I knew from a past client. I told him I needed to restructure the business quietly. He helped me draw up a set of contracts that transferred the core of our operations, bank accounts, supplier agreements, even the lease on the building, into a holding company under my sole name. All legitimate and clean. All impossible for Jennifer or my father to contest, because until now, the paperwork had always been in my hands. After that, I opened a second account at a different bank. I told Jennifer it was for expanding inventory, maybe even a second location if things kept growing. She smiled and said she was proud of me, told me I always knew how to dream big. I visited the suppliers in person, told them, confidentially, that we were switching things up. I paid off debts early. I ordered new shipments under the holding company. Slowly, carefully, I funneled our working capital out of the shared account and into one she didn't even know existed. At night, I still kissed her goodnight. I still asked if she wanted tea. I still touched her shoulder as I passed, still thanked my father for covering a shift, still laughed at a story one of them told. None of it was real. All of it was necessary. I began interviewing security companies under the guise of dealing with a string of thefts at nearby shops. I hired them for special event coverage, and they agreed to keep their presence discreet until I gave the word. I made a plan for the date and chose a Friday. Business was usually heavy then, traffic strong, plenty of people in and out. I wanted an audience. I wanted them to witness it, even if they didn't understand it, because what I was about to do was even for revenge. The sky that Friday morning was gray. I woke up early. Jennifer was still asleep, curled into herself with one hand under the pillow, peaceful in the way. I showered, shaved, dressed carefully to be taken seriously. I made coffee, like always. Kissed the kids goodbye before school. Jennifer got up while I was gathering papers. She stretched in the doorway, asked if I could handle the shop alone for the first half of the day so she could run some errands. I said of course. She smiled, thanked me, kissed me gently, the same kiss I'd once cherished, the one that used to mean, I'm yours. By 10 o'clock, everything was in place. The security team arrived in an unmarked van. They didn't wear full uniforms, just dark jackets. They positioned themselves at both entrances. My father arrived at the shop at 10:15, whistling as he stepped inside, carrying 2 bags of fresh bread rolls and pastries like he was hosting a Sunday brunch. He nodded at the guards, assuming they were delivery men or city inspectors. They didn't greet him, just watched. Jennifer arrived a few minutes later, hair still damp from the shower, perfume subtle but present, keys jingling in her hand. She walked past the guards without a glance. I waited until just after noon. The shop was busy. I stood behind the counter while they both chatted by the front display, laughing about something. I cleared my throat. They turned and I stepped out from behind the counter. I need to speak with both of you. Outside. My voice was calm, unmistakably serious. Jennifer blinked. What is it? Is something wrong? Not yet, I said, but it will be calm. My father chuckled, a forced sound. What's this? A surprise audit. I walked to the front of the store and they followed. When we stepped outside, the 2 guards stepped forward. No one spoke. I pulled a folder from my coat and held it out. This is a full set of updated legal documents. Effective 2 weeks ago, all ownership of this store, its contents, its accounts, its lease, belongs solely to the holding company I created under my name. You have no claim to it, none. Jennifer's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I turned to my father. You're not employed here anymore. You're not listed on the license. You're not covered by insurance. And you're barred from entering the premises under the terms of the updated lease. He blinked, lips tightening, trying to piece together what was happening. Jennifer looked at me. You're joking, she said, but her voice was already cracking. I handed her a second folder. This is the mortgage document. The house is under my name, always was. The bank is aware of the situation and your access to the joint account has been suspended. Cards deactivated, passwords changed. I've moved everything. She stepped back. The guards didn't move. My father spoke finally, his voice low and laced with anger. You think you can just erase us like this? I met his eyes. You already erased yourself. The day you put your hands on my wife. The day you let her call you better than me while lying in bed. His jaw clenched. Jennifer reached for my arm, desperate now, her voice rising. We made a mistake, okay? We were drunk. We weren't thinking. I cut her off with one glance. I heard every word. I know it wasn't the first time. And I know what you said when you thought I was too blind to see what was happening right in front of me. Two people passed by, slowed slightly, sensing something was wrong but not knowing what. Jennifer's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with both hands. My father stared at the ground. You lost, I said. You lost the store, home, money, and most of all, you lost me. But here's the thing. I stepped closer, my voice cold, final. This isn't your city. And now, it's not even your ruin. I made sure you walk away with nothing. I turned, walked back inside, and didn't look back. The door closed behind me with a quiet chime. They didn't come back, not to the shop, not to the apartment. I didn't see my father again after that Friday. Whether it was shame, anger, or a coward's instinct for self-preservation, he disappeared as swiftly as he had inserted himself into our lives. Jennifer left the same day, packed a few things while I was out, left the keys on the counter. No note, no text. What was there to say? That I loved her once, that I would have done anything for her? She already knew that. She knew it when she looked at me with those same eyes she later turned toward him, or when she let him in, not just into the shop or our house, but into the part of her that once belonged to me. What hurt was realizing she had been slipping away long before I noticed, and I had been too busy building a life for us to realize she was already living a different one. I kept the business running. There was comfort in it, in restocking shelves, greeting customers, counting receipts at the end of the day. Because I loved the work, it was stable and real. Numbers didn't lie. Inventory didn't betray you. A sale was a sale. A return was a return. It made sense in a way people rarely did. I moved into a smaller apartment, closer to the shop, one bedroom and just enough space to breathe. The boys stayed with Jennifer's sister for a while. She offered and said they needed quiet. I missed them every day. I called every night, asked about school, made them laugh with stupid jokes. They didn't ask why mom and dad weren't living together. I'd be ready to answer them honestly, not to poison their hearts, but to show them what dignity looks like in the aftermath of betrayal. There were nights I sat in the dark with a glass of water and nothing else. I'd cried enough those hours standing outside bedroom doors, those days listening to the woman I loved flirt with the man who raised me. I never intended to write this letter, but I know she read it. Jennifer, there was a time, and I say this without anger, when I would have walked through fire for you. Back when we had nothing. When we slept on old mattresses on bare floors. When we shared coffee made with hot water from the tap and laughed like we had the world in our hands. I believed in us and in what we were building slowly together. And maybe that was the mistake. You used my loyalty like a tool and then you handed it to him. You let the man who gave me life step into the part of mine I had given to you. And that, more than the betrayal, it is what I still don't fully understand. He wasn't better than me or more patient, more loving, more deserving. He was just there, and you reached for him. You let him call you his little lady. I couldn't leave you with the pieces of the life I built while you were slipping away behind my back. I couldn't let you keep the store, the name, the keys, the security that was born from my sweat and your deceit. You never said sorry, and I'm glad. Because I don't want your apology. You lost the right to offer me peace the moment you traded my love for convenience, and didn't even have the decency to pretend you regretted it. I'm writing this to say, you hurt me, but I live in a smaller apartment now. It's quiet and clean. I wake up with peace, and I go to bed without fear. I still visit the boys. They're doing fine. I'm done, but I'm free. Goodbye. You dear Peter. Thanks for being here till the end. Stories like this aren't easy to live through or to tell.